That all stems to how colonization has changed our entire world, beginning from the first settler that came in to now. There's that systemic genocide that continues to keep happening. That's the scary part, is systemic genocide. They don't like to talk about these types of cases.
That's Melissa Skeet. I'm Kara Duffy, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Welcome to the Powerful Ladies Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I am very excited to talk to you today. Your story is fascinating. What you're doing is incredible. Let's tell everyone your name, where you are in the world, and what it is that you're up to.
Yes. So my name is Melissa Skeet, and I just said hello in Navajo. So I'm Danette from the Navajo Nation. Grew up at the Grand Canyon National Park, and now I live in Washington State. So I am a ultra trail skater, slash victim advocate, slash professional and motivational speaker.
There's so much in that. So I want to first talk about the huge skate that you're taking on. So you're going to be roller skating from Washington to
Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm.
So Washington State to Washington, D.C., across the U.S. You're doing this on roller skates. Are you doing this by yourself? Do you have a team?
So right now, yes, I do have a team. I do have my fiance, Nate, who is going to be the individual who is going to be driving / at times he'll probably be biking to keep an eye on me to make sure I'm okay. He's my athletic trainer as well. He used to do athletic training as a profession, so he kind of makes sure that my body and gets what it needs. That includes if I have an injury or something, he knows how to tape up my ankle or something. So he'll be with me. He usually comes with me on a lot of events that I do in my skating events. And he's one person who I shouldn't say recently, it was kind of like a couple of years ago now, 2021, we did a similar skate, but we only reached 192 miles to go across the Navajo Nation. And he biked with me the entire way. So to make sure that, I had my nutritional needs, necessities, foods, whatever I needed on that skate. And I had a skater with me. Her name is Daisy Purdy, who actually is interested in roller skating with me, maybe for about partial way on this great skate tour. But there's a lot of different groups. And when I say groups, it's roller derby teams that are wanting to come out from Canada, different states that we hit up. Those local roller derby teams want to come out and hang out with us and skate with us and just root us on. A lot of them are coming out to help us out with, for safety reasons, safety purposes, to make sure that we get to that specific destination within that day, should I say, or within that week. So I guess you can say it's myself and my fiance Nate, but we do have a lot of people coming in. I guess I want to include them on the team as well from different states. Yeah.
And so why are you roller skating across the U.S.?
So I am roller skating across the U.S. to raise awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous persons and to further promote health, wellness, and healing. The only significance and the only intriguing part about it is that I'm doing it through roller skating. And, I've gotten a lot of different responses about, why aren't you doing it on inlines? It's a lot easier. And the part about roller skating, I think that a lot of people miss is what it brings to the table for me and how I want to help inspire others with their own healing journey. And my own healing journey actually started with roller skating. And roller skating turned into, it started from roller derby. And then it started to transition into trail skating. I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with being out on the outdoors, putting on my headphones, listening to my favorite music, and just going. Just getting on some random trail or even a road and skating. That brought so much healing to myself and to my well-being. And I want to be able to inspire others to let them know, even the skating world, even others who, I'm also including people to come out who are just wanting to walk, who are wanting to run, bike, even inline skaters, skateboarders to come out and say, hey, like we'll skate with you. Let's bring an entire community together and just do something important and to help out with this cause or this, to bring awareness to something that continues to be silenced.
You talk about working through your trauma. You have an assortment of traumas to choose from. What should people know about you and your trauma to give context to how much like roller skating has healed you?
I love that question. um, Beginning back, when I was a child, I saw, I was raised in a domestic violence family, and that was normalized. And I didn't realize growing up that I would see myself mirroring my parents' relationship. And to me, that was the type of relationship that I needed to be like or to have, or the only thing that I really knew and recognized. So once I started, getting older and dating different individuals, I ran into an individual, excuse me, I ran into an individual who almost tried to take my own life. And we started dating for a bit, and then there was a lot of red flags that I caught because during this time that I was in this relationship, I actually was an employed official victim advocate who worked with victims of sexual assault, and sexual abuse, domestic violence. But domestic violence was my main topic, my main crime that I worked mostly with. And I loved it. I really loved it. So during that time, I was a victim myself, and the abuser tried to strangle me. And that's when I knew he was trying to end my life. And it was the after effect that really, really stuck with me because I lost family members, I lost friends, and I even lost my job. My job, out of all groups and people that I trusted, I thought they would be the one individuals to support me. And there was probably like one or two individuals within that victim assistance agency that actually cared. The rest were victim advocates who say a lot of gross, unacceptable things that a victim advocate should not ever say in a line of work that they said to me, or that they said behind my back, or that they ostracized me and made me feel like I shouldn't be doing my job. So that was another huge emotional toll. And the fact too of losing friends and family is, what does that look like? It's when your own family members and friends actually blame you and think that you were the problem or that you were the issue, or you have family members who are like, why are you leaving this individual? Why shouldn't you go back to him? And then others are seeing it as, you've tried to leave so many times. How come you're going back to this guy? And then you get pushed away because people think that you're the crazy one. So after all of this, during that time, I was actually competing. What should I say? I was actually trying out for the high altitude roller derby team in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I, once I started really, really competing on this league in general, I realized that the family dynamics within this team was what I was missing, and what I, brought me to just stick around to these powerful, strong, empowering like women and men. And I realized these are my people. they are who I want to be around. And they basically saved my life during that time. And after that, being a part of trail skating, that turned into something bigger. So, how I want to bring the message about my own healing journey for others to just say, oh my gosh, Melissa, aka Skeet Fighter, her healing journey is so unique and she talks about it. I mean, can you imagine going to a conference who talks about child abuse or sexual abuse or domestic violence, and they read on one of the sessions, like a breakout session from that conference that says, my roller skates have a story to tell. I'm sure a lot of people are like, what the heck does this person have to, do with, or I don't know, why are they here at this conference? What does roller skating have to do with this conference? And when people show up, I'm like, this is my story that I'm going to tell you guys. This is, I'm going to talk about being a survivor of generational trauma, to a child being exposed to domestic violence at a young age, to seeing and realize or experiencing domestic violence and abuse, to where I almost lost my life, and then turning it into, this is my roller skating. My roller skates actually saved me. So it's very unique.
It is very unique. And I love that in one of the videos that you have promoting what you're doing, you're talking about how the abuse in your home was common. The statistics are crazy high for domestic abuse in Native communities. And you also talked about how the loss of your culture that was reinforced by your father after being sent to the residential schools, and him buying into that concept. So it's such a multi-layered removing of your identity and your power that I also think speaks in such a bigger way, because what part of you wasn't impacted by what you experienced in your home? And it's, most people have one of those boxes checked. And you have, for the silver lining is having these, so you can talk to so many more people about all of these things. But there's a lot of depth for you to bring your story to. We've had other women on this podcast who are advocates for missing and murdered Indigenous women. We've had Rosie Fish on, and she's been running to, make sure that people know what's going on. I think it's important that we revisit some of the stats about what's happening. So for people who aren't as informed as you are about what's going on with missing and murdered Indigenous women, like, what do we need to know? And what are some key facts that I think will show people the magnitude of what's going on?
Yeah. And Rosalie Fish, is it Rosalie Fish? Phenomenal person. And the work that she continues to do. I follow her on Instagram. And actually, I think my fiance does too, especially with her running and in general. I just love what she does. So with missing and murdered Indigenous persons, it first started out with missing and murdered Indigenous women. And it's a grassroots movement that started out a few years ago. And it started from Canada, working its way down into the United States. But a lot of these cases in general have, for a long time, since I can remember, growing up, one of my cousins was murdered. And to hear that, and then to hear your family say, let's just don't talk about it, it kind of stems back to growing up with secrets that you find out within your family and why we had to keep these certain things private. And the thing with that is, speaking about it and talking about it is one thing. And with these types of cases, this grassroots movement, starting from Canada, working down to United States, I don't think it was taken seriously. It was kind of seen as, the stereotypical norm of it was Native people are just a bunch of drunks and they abuse alcohol, they get into drugs, and that's just the way it is. And then they put themselves into these positions of Well, you're kind of asking to be killed. You're kind of asking to be sexually assaulted or abused by your partner. You kind of set yourself up in these positions. So that type of stereotype is passed on to the police department, and that police department kind of looks at them as this is just a typical the reservation or tribal lands. And to have that type of what I say and what I think is a negative outlook on the indigenous people, that is not our way, or that is not our traditions of violence. That was passed on from the colonization that was brought onto our lands. And for the Navajo people, the Diné people, we were forced off of our lands from Arizona to walk about over 300 miles into New Mexico by the government. And many, many Diné people were killed. Many of them were starving. Many of them were killed because they were sick. And the weather conditions were horrible and terrible. And they walked that entire way. And the government, trying to take over their land, they completely demolished their crops. They killed off their crops. The animals like the sheep, which we call Tibet in Navajo, killed them off. And because they wanted, basically, this was genocide. This was to try to kill off the indigenous people because the government wanted their land. The government wanted money. It was just, that's all it's really ever been about. There's a lot of other different stories. This is one story out of thousands across the entire nation, going up to Canada, where a lot of tribal, different tribal lands and tribes who fight for their land, but the government just keeps on, poking and poking and poking, trying to push them back and say, no, like, we have these policies. No, we can do whatever we want. No, this is going to be our land. And the tribe is like, no, this is our land. We know what the treaty says. This is what's happening. And then they just keep fighting back. And then there's this violence that is brought on by the police, the military. They just come at the tribes like this, and the tribes are standing their ground. And a lot of them are being killed. So it goes along too with, water is life. What is land back? That all stems to how colonization has changed our entire world, beginning from the first settler that came in to now. There's that systemic genocide that continues to keep happening. That's the scary part, is systemic genocide. And the media plays a part in it, where they don't like to talk about these types of cases. And I get that, because, should I say, every time that I try to get, partnerships or collaborations to help out with this great skate tour, to help promote this even further, to talk about this ongoing epidemic that continues to keep being silenced, these organizations and businesses are just completely ignore it, and they don't want to have anything to do about it. Or even with it, they tell me, oh, it's too newsy. We don't want to stir up trouble. It's like, okay. So, and that's another thing of why I want to bring about all of this. And there's a lot of cases right now that are being thrown under the rug, or they turn into cold cases. So Coal Brings Plenty is a recent case that, everybody is talking about. If nobody knows about it right now, I recommend to Google Coal Brings Plenty. And he's a Native American who actually was just recently killed. They're saying there's no foul play, but it's very odd that, of course, he had this is really, really, this disturbing part is where his braids was cut off. And some person did that to him, a non-Native. And that is very, very, their hair is very, very sacred. Our hair is very, very sacred. Mm-hmm. So given that information, and then they found him where his sister was killed about 6 months ago in the woods. I don't know how law enforcement or, the national policymakers, the media do not see that this is an issue. Who's going to have the freaking balls to come forward and say, this is wrong? So a lot of different social media outlets, or a lot of different influencers, are talking about it and bringing it forward. Oh, I've seen a lot of non-natives on TikTok and Instagram talking about it and saying, this is fucked up.
Yeah.
So, and I agree. This is just another one of those cases that, is an example of what's been going on and why MMIP is a big thing that we need to talk about. And given the fact of, we do have the red handprint, right? So the red handprint, people ask, what the heck is that? I've had people come up to me, especially in a recent skating race that I did last year. I had individuals making fun of me, saying I put on my makeup wrong. I had an announcer literally just say very inappropriate things about the handprint on my face as I'm, strolling through the finish line and just saying inappropriate things. Instead of that, why can't they just come to me and ask me what that means? I had an elder come to me, a non-native elder come to me, or he was, I don't know what age he was. He was probably in his 80s or something. And he comes up to me and he's like, you put on your makeup wrong. And I was like, actually, no. This stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons. And I started talking about it and he's like, oh. And he walked off. 5 minutes later, he comes back and he says, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Do you mind telling me a little bit more about that? I'm like, yes. Sit down and let's chat over some tea. So we did that. He just sat with my fiance and I, and we just started talking. And he's like, I didn't know about any of that. I am so sorry. He's like, he says, us white people, man, we suck. I'm like, I was like, well, thank you so much for, allowing me to share that with you, because a lot of people don't want to hear it. And that goes along with our history. Our history was not talked about. It was not provided within our education format when we went to school. And given my history, I don't know my language very well, because in one of my classes, the teacher got mad that I was speaking Navajo, told me to go to the principal's office, and I got a detention. They specifically told my parents, she cannot speak Navajo. She needs to talk English. So my parents had to enforce that on me and make sure that none of my family members taught me Navajo. And as an adult, trying to learn it and relearn it, it's the hardest thing ever. And I get it. I get a lot of, Indigenous elders saying, you need to learn your language. You need to learn it. I'm like, well, I'm kind of starting from scratch here. And as an adult, it is not as easy as when my brain was a sponge at a toddler's age. I'm doing whatever I can to relearn it. Just give me time. So it's given all of this information. There's a lot of information. If a person sees the red handprint on my face and they like down the road, while I'm skating, and they go on their phone and they Google it and it says, they can ask, what does the red handprint on the face mean? And right away, I guarantee you will hit MMIP or MMIWP or MMIW. And that is a start. To me, that is a start. My mission is to bring forward about the education and awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous persons, because murder is the third leading cause of death on Native American women. The youngest missing and murdered Indigenous person's case is an infant. And the oldest and the elders, it's about, I think it was like 80s or 90s of that individual. And we don't have a huge amount of like a big population of Native American individuals. Of course, colonization tried to wipe us out a long time ago, and we were trying to repopulate. But whenever we try to have a voice of our own and say, this is who we are, we want to speak about these cases. We want to speak about the mistreatment. We want to do this. It's like we get shut down. We get hit hard by the government or, media at times, or like the criminal justice system. And we're not idiots. Indigenous people are not stupid. We literally know what is going on here. And when we bring it up to them, or we bring and you start talking about it, they just look at us like, you guys are crazy. That's where the gaslighting starts. You guys are crazy. You guys are a bunch of drunks and alcoholics, whatever. And you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, actually, we do. So, and there's that stereotype too, where people see Indigenous people as what they have seen in movies from those old black and white movies. And they see us as like, oh, where's your bow and arrow? Or do you still live in a teepee? Which, by the way, these are actual literal questions that I've been asked by non-natives. And they'll ask me if, I thought natives looked a little different. Well, then they use Indians. I thought Indians looked like this from, like the John Wayne movies or whatever. I'm like, no, just a human, look like this. And it's just amazing, and just it bothers me to still see that people perceive us in that way. But for those who want to learn a little bit more about who we are and what MMIP is, I hands down give it to them and say thank you, yeah, thank you, Navajo, for wanting to learn and to be provided this education that wasn't provided to you in school. Yeah.
Does it feel empowering knowing that right now in time, especially in the US, there are so many minorities saying the same thing of you're not listening to us. You're not investigating our murders and our people who've gone missing. You're gaslighting us. You're trying to take away all of our rights. You're trying to get rid of us. Like, I don't know a community that isn't saying that right now, from the female community, the Black community, the Asian community, like you name it, the LGBTQ plus, like everyone's saying the same things. And when you add up all the, minorities of America, like it's the majority. Like it's such an old story that America has become, because it wasn't always, a white population. It didn't start that way. It's not that way now. I know California, it's not the leading race in California. And it's like, it doesn't even matter. Like you said earlier, we're humans. Like anyone who goes missing, anyone who is murdered should be a problem for the entire community, because I don't know when we lost taking care of our neighbors and remembering that we are our neighbors. Like this idea of an us versus them is so, it's being held by people that I don't have relationships with. So like I can't even understand why it's still existing.
Yeah. No, you're golden on that. Yeah, you're definitely right. And I do. I hear that from not just from my relatives or from my, indigenous, like other indigenous tribes. It's individuals who are of color, LGBTQ, two-spirit. They're all seen as, you guys are not a part of our, our crew or our cool man's club because God says this, or because the Bible specifically says this. And that's one thing of colonization that they brought to the lands, was to kill the man and save, or was it kill the Indian, save the man. That was their motto. That was their logo, basically their logo of trying to turn a Native American child into a white man, because to them that was the way of life. That was the way that they needed to be trained to, to be civilized. That went along with, erasing their culture, their traditions, who they frickin' are. And that I see it, going back to your question from before of like my father, or your statement before, it was my father. I saw a few things that he had gone through, of understanding that, and it could have been fear too, that if he went outside of his belief system of Jesus Christ and the Bible and whatever came along with that, and teaching my children that if I went away from that, am I going to get abused? If I went away from that, what's going to happen to me? So I don't want to speak for him. I don't know and understand why, because I don't want to be that person that is seeing negativity on anybody's religion, but for it to be forced on a person, that is not right. And for me, my brother and I, I myself, I am not. I am more spiritual. You know, I believe in my culture and my traditions, all of that. And growing up, I didn't have what's called a Canelda. And in Navajo, that is a woman or a young girl transitioning into womanhood. And they have a big ceremony, like a celebration for her, so she can walk in beauty throughout her entire life, to have that protection and strength. And it's a very, very awesome and amazing and intense ceremony. My father did not want me to have that. He basically mentioned that it belongs to the devil. Was that him saying it personally inside? I don't know. But to me, it sounded something I would hear in a boarding school that he went to. So this is generational trauma. And I do see generational trauma on, a lot of elders, or they will talk about it. Not all of them will. And for them to talk about it, they are setting themselves back into that trauma and don't ever want to go back there again. But a lot of that and the trauma, they weren't guided of how to take care of their soul or their, who they are. It was just, I'm going to grab a bottle of vodka, or I'm going to grab some, beer, and I'm going to chug it because it's going to make me feel good. Or, getting into substance abuse. And it's just, I feel like, my father wasn't guided, or my mom, same thing, wasn't guided. She grew up in a very abusive home as well. Both of them did. And I think that was just normalized too. So, but I didn't start learning about all of this until getting, just in my 30s. My 20s, I was kind of like, what, whatever. And 30s, I started to really grasp onto to learning more of who I am. And it's just, my parents, I honestly don't have a relationship with them right now. There's a lot of abuse and pain and all of that I was not wanting to be a part of anymore. But now I want to talk further about how this has really taken a toll on just, a person like myself. And I could be one out of thousands who have a story to tell, or who have, you know, uh, they are looking for their own healing journey still. And I want to be able to just inspire and help and talk about it. And there's just a history that yeah, there's just a lot,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Well, and I think from the history perspective, like I love reading about history. I love exploring different cultures, everything. And when I read a book about the westward expansion in the US, and they had never talked sequentially about like what was happening in history when some of these things were happening. But some of the biggest land pushes west were post Civil War. And all they did was take all these guys who had come from the war, half of whom had lost the Civil War, with all their rage and all their upset and all their how they thought the US was going to be and it wasn't, and turned them to be like, okay, now go deal with that problem. So it's like compounding an issue of we weren't sending negotiators. Like we just were like, oh, you have anger issues? Let's put you over here so that you can cause trouble over here. And, we'll clean it up in a couple of centuries. Thanks. Bye. And it's like,
Yeah.
what? Like, I think like that context of who was going out and doing these things and why, and the having a bigger picture of like all the layers of what everyone involved was dealing with. You're like, who thought this was a good idea? Like, who thought this was necessary? And I just, when you start seeing the layers of history in full depth, it starts shifting all of it. Doesn't make any of it right. It just starts shifting it to be like, oh, okay. Someone knew what they were doing and knew that that was going to make it worse than it would have been.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's like this ripple effect
Mm-hmm.
from, they're thinking, oh, we're going to do it now. nothing's going to happen in the future. Nothing's, bad's going to happen down the line. Realizing that, generational trauma is a real thing. And what does that look like? Oh, a lot of crap that happened in our history. It's now we're starting to talk about it. And now a lot of government, whoever else is like, no, don't talk about that. We need to ban these types of children's history books, or we need to ban these history books in these certain states. So we just don't want these young children to feel bad. We don't want the non-natives to feel bad about what happened. It's like, you're not doing you're not doing a great job of leading, first of all. Second of all, these individuals, these young kids need to grow up understanding what is actually going on in the world. Truthfully.
Yeah. You have gone through this roller coaster of trauma. You've come out on the other side. I know that trauma is something that we continue to process, and it likes to show up in really fun ways when we're not expecting it.
Yes.
But you've decided to channel all this energy and passion you have into being a speaker, and then really excitingly to doing this cross-country roller skating trip. You're raising money for...
It's going to a nonprofit and, Indigenous organization that we want it to help with their programs. We want it to help with their mission. We want it to help if, they have programs specifically for your Indigenous youth. Right now, I'm still trying to look for that nonprofit Indigenous organization that is willing to work with us throughout this entire time. Not just say, okay, yeah, of course, we'll work with you. And then we never hear from them again, expecting the funds to come in. So I just want this to be an actual partnership where we work closely together to bring forward this awareness, but also to talk about this organization on my platform, to promote them further to anybody, any Indigenous folks to come out and say, yes, I need help. I would love to talk to this organization. That's my mission and goal, is to bring more and more awareness to, of course, MMIP, but to this organization that I'm partnering up with. And working to get these donations and, proceeds to this organization is not easy. And that is why another thing of doing this Great Skate Tour to roller skate across the entire nation is to help a nonprofit Indigenous organization get the funds that they need. So, because I get it, I've worked for a nonprofit. It is not easy to get those funds, especially grant writing and asking for grants is not easy. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll be that person to try to help. I'll just roller skate across the nation to bring this about. So we are still looking for an Indigenous nonprofit right now. My way of doing that is to talk to the individuals, if it's the board, whoever. I want to have a meeting with them. That meeting will entail of what I do, who my team is, what the mission is, what our goal is, and within that goal is to, okay, this is how much we would like to bring in for your organization. And right now we're looking about $25K to about $35K to this organization. So far, people have donated. Part of this too, we are hoping, my partner and I, is to get at least $15K to about 25, maybe less than that, K to help us actually do this event. It is not cheap. And we are actually thinking of, okay, we're just going to probably have to do with what we have.
Just like anyone who was doing a National Geographic tour, you have to cover the cost to make it happen. Otherwise, no one's going to be doing these things anymore.
Yep.
Well, so we have a couple rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah.
The first is, what does powerful and ladies mean to you? And do their definitions change when they're next to each other?
Ooh. Powerful ladies together is something very, very empowering and strong. You could split them apart and you just see two separate words. You can just see woman, which is you and I, and then there's powerful, like, oh, okay, something needs to go along with what that powerful means. But when you put them together, man, they unite. It's unstoppable. Very unstoppable.
We ask everyone on the podcast where you put yourself on the Powerful Lady scale. If 0 is average everyday human and 10 is the most powerful lady you can imagine, where would you put yourself today and on an average day?
Oh, it's like asking, like when someone asks me, like, can you write a bio about yourself in third person? I'm like, oh. And so I feel like I'm bragging about myself, you know? Powerful. I never realized I saw myself as that. But I do see myself as a powerful woman warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this meme recently that said, it was a elder talking to their grandchild, and he was saying, son, you're not a survivor, you are a warrior. You've gone through so much crap, but you shouldn't label yourself as a you shouldn't label yourself as a survivor. You should label yourself and see yourself as a warrior, because you continue to keep doing great things. And I do. I see myself as a woman warrior, because gone through so much shit, but when you come out of that and you do phenomenal things, it takes, I feel like I'm not doing enough, but it takes my fiance and others to tell me, holy shit, woman, you're doing phenomenal things and you need to give yourself some credit.
Yeah. And it's important to step into your power and take up the room that you have so that other people know that they can do it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Empowering others.
Yes. So for everyone who wants to follow you, support you, donate, come roller skate with you, where can they find and follow you?
The best place to come and find me is on Instagram, which I post a lot on my Instagram, but I get it. A lot of people don't have Instagram. I do have Facebook and TikTok and an email address. Instagram is at Skeet_fighter. Facebook, just search Skeet Fighter. And TikTok is at Skeet_fighter. And my email address is just melissa.skeetfighter@gmail.com.
Perfect. The last question we have for you today is, what's on your wish list or your to manifest list? This is a big community. How can we help you make something come true?
Oh, to make this come true is to get it, the donations to come in. Not gonna lie, my fiance and I are like a little nervous and stressed out, anxiety, but mixed in with excitement at the same time. So it's the right thing. It's just trying to get as much donations in as possible, and mainly, yes, of course, for us to make this happen. But my fear is not getting enough donations in for the nonprofit organization. And I get it. A lot of people are like, we want to know that this is going to the nonprofit. I'm like, you got it. Make sure that happens. So this isn't my first rodeo, to be honest. It is my first rodeo when it comes to skating across the nation. But, we want to make sure that not only are these Indigenous nonprofits, getting the help that they need, or the help that, is for their programs, basically, to help their mission, but to also for the families, of the victims and survivors of missing and murdered Indigenous persons, that you do have these warriors coming, and we will make sure that you're being heard. Did that answer?
Yes. I was like, that's a perfect way to wrap this up.
Okay. Cool.
But just thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and that you are stepping into your power even when you have all the reasons to not, and to let someone else, lead the way. But I'm sure that you can't. You have to do this. So thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you for being a stand for people who don't have a voice or are afraid to use their voice. You're not alone in this fight, and I just thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for being a yes to me, and of course to the Powerful Ladies.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been an honor.
All the links that connect with Melissa and support her skate across America are in our show notes at thepowerfulladies.com. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening and leave us a rating and review. Join us on Instagram at Powerful Ladies and at Kara_Duffy. And you can also find me at karaduffy.com. Next week, I'll be back with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.